Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives of the world's leading global brands. Today, we have some special guests and a special show for you today. I'm joined by Karin Hurt and David Dye, authors of the best-selling book, Courageous Cultures, and founders of Let's Grow Leaders. Welcome to the show. How are you both?
Oh, we're terrific. Thanks so much for having us.
Welcome to the show. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about yourselves personally and sort of your journey to where we are today. We'll start with yourself, Karin.
Okay, so before founding Let's Grow Leaders 6 years ago, I spent 20 years at Verizon. So the first decade was human resources, leadership development, organizational development, all that kind of stuff. A lot of merger integration work. Second decade was a variety of field assignments. Led a 2,200 person sales team, a 10,000 person customer service organization. And during my last assignment there, I was leading our strategic partnership channel, which was all of our outsourced call centers. And I was finding that as I was working with all of these different companies who were taking Verizon's calls, I was looking for ways to make leadership very practical, because people did not have a lot of time, in these environments. And so I started writing a blog to be helpful. So I told my stories, I broke things down into very practical tools and techniques. Well, the blog took off. I started getting this international following. People started asking me, hey, will you come speak? When are you writing your book? And I thought, I have this day job, I can't do that. And then I thought, well, what if I could? And so took the leap and went out and started Let's Grow Leaders. And it's been fascinating. We have an opportunity to work with clients all over the world to really help them get breakthrough results and stay a decent human being along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I had several decades as well in human service, was an executive in that industry, as well as some time as an elected city councilman, elected official. And in the course of my career, I did a lot of work replicating and building organizations throughout the United States and investing and coaching leaders and executives who were leading those organizations. And at a certain point, I hit a wall where there wasn't enough of me to go around. I couldn't spend the time to invest in all those people. So I, too, started a blog, started capturing all of those leaders.
There's a theme here. There's a theme.
There is a theme, right? And that's actually how Karin and I met. We met online. It wasn't the like swipe right or swipe left kind of online. I mean, I would have swiped the right. I don't even know what the right direction is.
Don't get that wrong.
Right. Yeah. I'm not even going to say because I don't know. But we met in the course of the leadership writing and realized that we were really aligned in our messaging. In fact, I one time came across an HR article that I thought, I don't recall submitting this. And then I realized in the byline, oh, Karin had done it. So we talked, had an initial conversation, met at a couple of conferences, and through that journey, decided to write our first book together, living 1,700 miles apart. I don't know how many kilometers that is, maybe 3,000 or so. But the outcome of that was we wrote our first book, Winning Well. And then as that was getting published, we had become very good friends and decided, and Karin was the first one to take the initiative on this, decided to give it a chance to be something more than co-authors. And so today we are married, we merged our businesses, and Let's Grow Leaders is the product of that. And it's such a privilege to be able to work with leaders around the world to help them get those breakthrough results without sacrificing their humanity in the process.
There's so much to take away from that. I don't know where to start. What a cool journey, and the fact that you connected over a bond of through your passions, right? And that led to you being married and where you are now, and that's pretty amazing. It's super amazing. Just a random question, but I've always said to my wife, I was wondering if we ever work together. I said, like, would you drive each other crazy?
Since this is the launch day of our new book, it's been a really hectic couple of weeks, so probably a bad time to ask how easy that is.
I'm only joking. To be honest, we've learned to work a lot better now. We're obviously working from home like everyone else around the world. You kind of learn how to work with each other, and when your own space, right, you kind of get used to that as well. But super excited for this new book, and I think now more than ever, right, during what we're going through, where your work, I feel like is going to have it's having great impact anyway, but I feel like now more than ever, there's so many leaders out there that you can help, right? So I'm sure you've seen a lot of companies coming to you during these times. But just to start from the beginning, what was the inspiration behind this new book?
You know, Chris, it was really interesting. As we were working with clients across a variety of industries, we were noticing a consistent pattern. We'd be working at the very senior levels of an organization, and we would hear things like, why am I the only one who discovers these best practices? Why aren't people bringing us more ideas? You know, what's wrong with my managers? Why can't they see this stuff and fix it? And then we would be doing work at the front line with supervisors or even with their teams. And we'd hear things like, oh, nobody really wants my ideas. The last time I spoke up, I got in trouble. And we thought, or nothing ever happens. We thought, are you working for the same company? You know, so employees have ideas. They want to make contributions. Senior leaders, most cases, really do want to hear them. And yet somehow there was a disconnect. So we partnered with the University of North Colorado Social Research Lab on a really extensive study, both a quantitative study and a qualitative study, to determine why was this happening? Why was this such a consistent pattern? And who was doing it well? You know, and so from there, we were able to translate that into some really practical tools and a roadmap.
Yeah, and then as we looked at the future of work and how teams organize and what's going on at a macro level, and honestly, the pandemic has just hastened this, is you could see the transformations, and you've had so many guests on that talk about this from different aspects, but work is changing. And the days of a single leader having all the answers, right, are long gone. And with artificial intelligence and the ability to systematize and all of the routine work, anything that could be looked at in the past, computers can do it, robots can do it, and usually more effectively, more efficiently. But what they can't do better is create the future. And that takes the human beings on your team. And so as we were looking at the future and addressing all of these questions, we wanted to give leaders a roadmap to be able to have the maximum competitive advantage possible by getting the input, contribution, ideas, problem solving, customer advocacy, micro innovations from every single member of their organization. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, all of that is what Courageous Cultures ends up being.
Yeah. I was saying during our summit on Wednesday, actually, that without those ideas and the input of my team and the diverse thought and perspectives, I don't think we would have came through this. You know, at this crisis and events business, it was kind of bringing the team together and everyone contributing and bringing their ideas. You know, some were good, some were bad, but the whole point is that we create a culture where everyone's open to sharing and failing forward, and I feel like that was really led us to being able to pivot quickly. And reinvent, you know, what we did at HR Leaders, because we couldn't do our face-to-face events, of course, given what's happening. So super important. What is the structure of the book? It obviously, was there, during your research, was there anyone else out there that was doing quite significant work around this? If so, what were your takeaways? And then how did you go about creating a formula for this?
Well, Amy Edmondson, who wrote the Fearless Organization, right? She's fantastic, and she is really the pioneer of psychological safety. And so as we were doing our lit review and getting prepared to do our own research, we really grounded ourselves in what she was focused on. And in fact, she wrote the foreword to the book, which was lovely. She did a beautiful job of that. So that's really where it starts. So the structure of the book first starts with the research, and we talk about the main findings of why people don't speak up. And then from there, we talk about the importance of navigating the narrative, your own narrative around courage and your willingness to speak up, because leaders go first. And if your team is watching you and you're encouraging ideas, but you're holding back, you know, that won't work. And then from there, we could go through the rest of the 7-step process, which starts with really clarity, being really clear about where you need ideas and that you really are interested in hearing them. And then cultivating curiosity, which is deliberately going out, and we give very practical tools and techniques for asking for ideas. And then from there, responding with regard.
Yeah, respond with regard. How do you maintain the momentum and energy of every idea you hear? And Chris, like you just said, some of those ideas are like, what were you thinking? And they don't really understand it as a leader, how you respond in that moment.
It's important, because if you discourage them, they're not going to come with any other ideas ever again.
Exactly right. Exactly. So how do you go about doing that? We give you the tools there. And then from there, practice the principle, which is, a mistake a lot of leaders will make is that they'll see something going well in a particular team, a behavior, a practice, and they immediately say, everybody's doing that now. And that's a mistake, because it may not be contextually relevant with different teams, different customers, different processes, but there could be a principle underneath that. And if you can draw that out, that's scalable, that's replicable, and something that you want to share. And then building an infrastructure or galvanizing the genius, galvanize the genius about how you transfer your new best practices and share these ideas in a way that's sticky and where they actually take hold. The communication and accountability that you do there. And then finally, building an infrastructure for courage. How do you align your systems from onboarding all the way through employee lifecycle, training, and so on to align with courage?
Yeah, and ask that question for everyone listening is, I love the fact that how practical the book is for everyone, because there's one thing talking about it, but there's another thing actually implementing and creating some frameworks. And so that's something that I definitely took away from the copy you sent over to me. So thank you for that. What are some of the things that what stops people from speaking up, and what are some of the things that we do that we perhaps not even aware of that stop people from doing that?
Yeah. So in the research, that some of the key things that came out were, first one is that leaders don't ask. We had 49% of respondents said, I'm not asked regularly for my ideas by my leader. We had just over 2/3 of respondents say, my managers operate under the notion that this is how we've always done things, and it's the way we're always going to do things. And then, in polls, when we do programs, one of the most common ones, and the research bore this out, 50% of folks said, if I were to share an idea, nothing's going to happen.
So just don't share at all.
Yeah, that's
how they feel, by the way. I think a lot of people listening, we can all understand how. I think we've all been there before. It's like, I'm not even going to bother sharing because just nothing's going to happen anyway. Yeah.
So you've got those things that come out in the research, but then you've got some core human psychology that contributes as well.
Yeah, 40% said, I lack the confidence to share my ideas. And then in the case studies and in the interviews, when we dug underneath that, it really linked back to the psychological safety. The reasons people weren't sharing is, in the past, at some point, they had a crappy boss who shut them down or stole credit for their ideas. And even if they're working for a remarkable person now, that scar tissue is top of mind. And, I remember a really in-depth conversation I had with one person, and they were just, I'm not sharing ideas ever again. I said, how long ago was this bad experience that you had? And he said, 10 years ago at a completely different company. And so that's one of the things when we're working with executives on this, to say, assume that might be there, and that's why you're going to have to really go out and make it safe and really communicate clearly that you want ideas. And one of the things that we've been finding as we've been implementing all of this work with companies is the way to make this easier is to ask specifically. So don't just say, I want ideas. Say, I want ideas about how can we increase productivity while we're working from home and maintain everybody's sanity. Like, be really specific about where you want ideas. And that makes people feel safe too.
Because there's a human tendency in the psychology to discount the future. And we underestimate the positive benefits that will happen from our ideas and from raising our hand and from the solutions that we might contribute. And so even if you're a fantastic leader, or, you're a HR professional here and you've got amazing leaders in your organization, people still discount the future. And so we've got to overcome that as leaders.
What was the part of the research that surprised you most?
Gosh, I think one of the things that came out was when we said, if you have a great idea, why wouldn't you share it? What would hold you back? And the most common answer to that question was, I wouldn't get credit, which was fascinating. Of all the options that were available, that not getting credit would be the number one. When you think about it, like, people want to be seen and recognized and feel that their idea is making a difference. So I think that's a variation on that theme of feeling like it's not.
And I really believe that, because I'll be on a keynote stage and share that statistics, and you look at the audience that they're going,
What did you think it was going to be? Because you said you were surprised. What were some of the other options that were in there that you thought it was going to be?
I really thought it would be something along the lines of they just don't want to hear it, as opposed to the not getting credit. But everybody has that story of sharing an idea, and the idea goes off and does great, and the person who contributed it isn't recognized, isn't seen.
I literally was thinking of an exact example of like literally about 10 years ago, but that happened to me, and I didn't share ever since then because I was like so demotivated. Especially in Spain, I was seeing that leader being celebrated and rewarded for that idea. Like, and you don't really want to say anything, right? You're like, you shouldn't have to, first and foremost. Like, and it's so, I'm sure so many. If you're listening right now on LinkedIn, you can relate. Post in the comment. Post a comment now. If you're gonna agree, if you feel that you understand what we're talking about.
You may not have time to read all those comments.
Yeah, I know.
The interesting thing too is we asked, what are the ideas that you're not sharing? Like, what kinds of ideas are you not sharing? And they're not trivial. It's not like, oh, I want kombucha in the break room. It's, they said it would, the top 3 reasons that, or top 3 topics are improve the customer experience, to improve productivity in a process, or improve the employee experience. So those are really important ideas.
The top 3 things that businesses always said they want to focus on.
Right?
Yeah. Could you share some examples of companies or people that are doing this well?
Sure. Number of different fun ones that came up. And we were just talking about this before we got on air with you. But one of our favorites was one that we encountered almost accidentally. And it was actually Karin's sister.
Yeah. So this is at WellSpan Health. So WellSpan Health Systems. And my sister is the director of rehab there. And I was telling her about our research. And she said, Karin, I think we do this. And I said, well, tell me your story. And she said, when we are about to implement something new, or we are working on a strategy, or we have an important decision to make, we always designate one person to act on that in that meeting on behalf of the patient. So say Joe is the director of IT. In that meeting, if Joe's going to be the patient, Joe can't talk about bandwidth or anything IT related. He's only allowed to think like a patient. So she said, we were implementing a new scheduling system for our inpatients. So the reason for this was, Jill's team went in to do some rehab work, but they would find an empty room because the patient would be off in testing. It was a real problem. So this new system was going to solve for that. Great. They're having this meeting. They're talking about their implementation plan. IT director Joe raises his hand, says, I want to know my schedule too. And everybody went, oh, no, that's not a good idea. He's like, no, I get it. This is a hospital, emergencies happen. But even if it's 80% right, can you imagine? I already have cancer.
Yeah.
I already feel out of control. If I would know my schedule, then my wife wouldn't have to feel like she had to be here all the time just in case something important was going to happen.
Yeah.
And she said they all thought about that, and they went ahead and made the decision to do transparency. And so patients now can see their schedules. And she says, it's not perfect, but it is a lot better. And patient satisfaction has really gone up. And so that's an example of, it's a micro innovation. That's not a major, right? But it's enough to make a big impact. And that's where the customer, that's an example of customer advocacy. You want to talk about a Basecamp?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about them. One of my favorite interviews and conversations for the book was with Jason Fried, who is the co-founder of Basecamp. And we were talking about how you help employees be able to come up with great ideas. And he said, totally hear and see everything that you saw that prompted you to write the book in terms of executive wanting ideas and so forth, and frontline people not. He said, but one of the things that people overlook is that if you want people to be thinking strategically, that takes space, it takes margin, it takes downtime. And when we schedule up packed calendars chock full of back-to-back meetings, we're not leaving any space for that. And so they have adopted a number of different strategies there at Basecamp to create that space, to create that margin, and keep people being able to think strategically. From managing how they schedule meetings and so on to in the summer, Fridays off. It's a company wide. You do 4-day work weeks during the summer, trying to maintain that sense of mental equilibrium and availability. And then in how they delegate work, it's not a, what's the word I'm looking for? As opposed to dictating how every step's going to work, they really do a good job of defining the outcomes and allowing teams to come up with their solutions for those outcomes. So they're taking advantage of team level micro innovations that get baked into what's going from there. And all of that, you can read more about their work, and it doesn't have to be crazy at work.
It's super important. Back to your point, Karin, the transparency piece. We've seen it a lot during COVID, right? That we don't have all the answers, and it's not going to be perfect, but we'd rather know, right?
Right.
We'd rather, again, the schedule's probably going to change, your sister's organization, and things aren't going to be perfect. But that versus not knowing at all.
Right.
You'd rather have that. And we've seen a lot of, that's been something I've been quite seeing, which has been quite refreshing with a lot of organizations, CEOs and leadership team through this, is being very open and transparent. We don't have all the answers. We don't know what next week looks like, but this is what we're doing now. Yep. And just giving people that, because otherwise you're just kind of in the unknown. And as humans, we always go straight to negative, don't we? Right. We kind of jump straight to negative, and no one's sitting there positively. We don't know what's going on, but it's all great. We don't work that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, our favorite way of saying that is that the best antidote to uncertainty is clarity. We don't know what's going to happen next week, but we can be very clear about what we're doing today.
Exactly. And that alone, and that's something I've taken away from that as well with my team. When this all happened, everyone looked at me. I was like, what are we doing? I was like, I don't know, but this is what we're doing today. So it's really helped. And step by step, you always kind of, rather than focusing on trying to solve the challenge at the end, which we can't because no one knows what's going on, I'm focusing on the process. And step by step what I'm doing on a daily basis. As it changes as well. What about what examples of people doing it really badly? So let's talk about what not to do.
Well, I'm thinking of, this is a good and room for improvement. We were working with a large financial institution, and they were doing a robust job of cultivating curiosity. They were asking for input. They had a great high-end technological system for getting contributions from every employee at every level of the organization. And we were talking with an executive about the system and what was going on. And he said, what's interesting is that half of the ideas that are submitted are things we're already doing. And we said, oh, well, gosh, your employee scores and your internal pulse surveys and things must be really high in terms of feeling heard and valued. And he said, well, you would think that, but no, not really. They're not reflecting that. And we dove a level deeper and discovered that when we asked the question, so how are you circling back and telling the employees that their idea is so good, it's already being used? And he said, oh, we're not really doing that.
Oh, such a missed opportunity.
Oh, so think about what's happening now, right? In that employee's mind, they don't care what I've got to say. They don't take my ideas seriously. They don't really, it just reinforced all those negative ideas that aren't true. They do want it. It is being used. It is adding value. And all it takes is just circling back around and saying, here's what happened. And so that's one example of how what we call respond with regard. And it's have gratitude. If the idea needs some more information, add that information and then an invitation. So, hey, thank you for sharing that idea. Here's some more information about how it's already being used, or maybe a strategic priority you weren't aware of that. If you can help solve that, and then an invitation. Love to get your thinking on how we can do what you were talking about and solve, our colleagues' strategic priority they've also got to take care of. If you can come up with some ideas there, all ears, love to hear that. And now we're reinforcing and keeping that momentum going.
Yeah, we have some examples in the book of, and we won't tell you which companies. We don't help the company.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
But the three, behaviors that we see really shut people down are shame, blame, and intimidation. So for example, it's the chief operating officer who goes to an offsite and puts up on the screen and stack rank all of the sales vice presidents, from top to bottom, and then hands the microphone in reverse order to the people at the bottom and asks them to explain themselves in front of everyone.
That was literally my company that I worked in for 10 years, by the way. It was on the sales floor. So literally you'd walk past every day and you'd see every single salesperson listed, how much money they've made, and at the bottom, literally the bottom 10 are in red pen. Imagine how bad that is to wake up a day and walk into your office and see yourself there, and everyone else looking at you, knowing how much you're getting paid, where you are on that, right? And you're obviously you're in a position where you're likely to not have a job. So that was anyway, sorry to drop you, but I know exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah, and then the blame. This is also an example that we saw where, a very senior leader, a decision went wrong, right? So they made a decision, it did not go well, but it was her decision. And then in this meeting, all of a sudden, she's totally denying accountability for making that decision. She's blaming everybody else who in the room, So who's going to speak up in a time like that? The trust is degraded. So we do have a whole chapter where we talk about all these negative things. Like if this stuff is going on, you're not ready to build a courageous culture. You got to fix that first. Like this is way past Me Too and all of those horrible things. You've got to create that baseline of psychological safety, or people won't share ideas. They're too exhausted just showing up.
And it's unfortunately still too common that people have to use all the courage they can muster just to show up and do their job. There's a limited store of that each day. If you're consuming all of that there, you're not saving any to raise your hand on behalf of a great idea.
What are some practical steps that we can take to kind of get the ball rolling? Because I think everyone probably listening agrees with you. And again, now modern era is so important. But what does it look like in a practical sense? What steps can we take?
Yeah, so I would start by really determining where you need your best ideas. Pick one topic, pick one area, and then go out and be very clear and ask some courageous questions about that idea. So in a courageous question, it differs from a regular question in the fact that it's vulnerable because it assumes something is wrong and it's very specific. We have a client, Mural Consulting, Don Yeager. He says, what is one policy that sucks? And he asks his frontline call center people that.
In that exact setting, I love it.
Words.
Love it.
Yeah, and he said, but that's it lightens people up. And
it makes it okay to say, like if you're asking the question in that frame, it makes it okay to reply back.
Yeah.
And it not be too serious or too, love it.
That's the essence of a courageous question.
And then we have an idea model, which is a very simple way for people to think through their ideas. So it's, we love acronyms. So why is this idea interesting? So if you go to folks and they're working, and we do this a lot in our workshops, right? So what makes this idea interesting? Meaning, how does it align with where we're headed strategically? Is this idea doable? Meaning with everything that we're spinning in right now, do we think we could pull this off? Is it within our purview to make happen? Is it engaging? Meaning who else would think this is a great idea? And how do we get them on board to help us? And what would you recommend are a couple of key actions? So right after this session, we're actually going to be heading back into one of our programs. And yesterday, people began thinking about 5 strategic areas that they're doing work on. And we went through our Own the Ugly process to really pull that out. Now, today, they're going to be going through the idea model to vet their ideas and then pick one and then build their case and pitch these ideas back to senior leadership around the 5 strategic areas. So over, a day and a half, they're going to have all of this fantastic strategic ideas that people have not only just brought up, but actually thought through.
Amazing. So the book really kind of gives you that full framework to be able to deliver this within a few days of your team and then start working on those projects, but more importantly, projects that actually you can implement.
Absolutely.
You have to do, because we all have a million ideas that we would love to put in place, but are they going to move the needle, and does it make sense?
Yeah. The thing is, you don't really need to be thinking, all those big game-changing ideas are important and strategic and wonderful. And if you could just focus on the little micro improvements.
Imagine what would happen if you had a micro innovation, the small improvement in a process, customer experience, employee efficiency every day for a year. What would that do for your team? How would that transform your company or your organization? And that's what courageous cultures are all about, is fostering and cultivating that.
In the book, do you discuss, or is there parts where you talk to teams to say, look, make this as part of your day-to-day meetings or your sort of morning meetings with your teams? And because that kind of really builds, I try to do that. I wish I could do it more often, to be honest, with my own teams, to encourage that during our weekly meetings. And making space for that.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about in the book is that at the core of a courageous culture, there is kind of a dance back and forth between the clarity and the curiosity. And so making space for each of those. And what we encourage you to do practically is start where you aren't. Some teams and some companies have a very high clarity culture where we know our processes and this is the way it's done and so forth. And if that's where you are, great. Start with curiosity. And if you're in a team that's incredibly creative and curious and freewheeling ideas, it might be that you need to introduce some more clarity to the equation. And as those alternate taking center stage, that's how you build that courageous culture together.
Interesting. Yeah. I think you have to be a lot more intentional about it as well, though, right? And make it part of the process as opposed. I think that's something, you know, I think in my organization it happens quite organically, but I think we do need to be a bit more intentional about making space. Even that means scheduling time out in my diary for time to reflect and be curious intentionally and be courageous. I think that's something well, not many of us, I'm sure, don't do.
Love that word, intentionality, right? You know, so when we talk about the open door, you know, that a lot of leaders say, well, I've got this open door, but the best ideas aren't going to walk through your open door because it's a passive approach. And so the intentionality is to say, okay, no, I need that idea to ask that courageous question.
Yeah. And I think it you know, really begins with setting the stage at new hire orientation, you know, because you've got people who are come from your competitors in many
questions. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And you know, all we do mostly what people do is say they focus on the clarity. This is how we do things around here. Right. And instead say, you know, yes, this is how we do things around here. And I'm really curious, what is one thing that the company you came from does better than us? You know, and I'm going to come back and ask you that again in a month, because after you've had the time to see, because it might not even be top of mind or they might be too scared, but just to keep throughout that whole onboarding process that you are also showing up curious.
We suggested that in the book. And then we were talking to an executive just last week for a food company. And she was telling us about her internal survey. And she's, we do that. We ask a couple times a year, what's one thing that you did at a previous employer that might be a good idea for us here? I mean, how brilliant is that? That's a micro innovation. It's not hard.
Yeah. What do you think the impact is going to be on companies that don't do this? That don't take advantage of this?
I think especially during this time where you needing to pivot and do the best you can with what you have from where you are. The companies who don't do this are at a distinct competitive advantage, because you can't just read the playbook of how to lead during and transform your organization during the middle of a pandemic and racial unrest and all the things that are happening here, right? So if one guy's trying to figure it out all by himself, or another company's got 100 people trying to figure it out, who's going to win?
That's a great way of putting it. That's a really good way of putting it. As well. Like, I'm conscious of time as well, and I could feel like we could talk about this forever. But I know I have to let you go at some point. You got to get back to your training. One more question: what's been the feedback from the book so far? So people that you've done the training with and have got a copy of the book, what's been the main feedback you've been getting?
It's been incredible. The one of the main things that we've heard, and of course, when you start a journey like this 3 years ago with the research and everything, you don't anticipate this is going to happen. We didn't know the world was going to be as it is.
Yeah.
But the number one thing that we have heard is, oh my goodness, you guys wrote the perfect book for this time. This is so important. This is a very senior executive at a very large tech company. This is my go-to handbook right now for everything I'm doing from a leadership perspective through these times.
Yeah, again, for me personally, you sent me over the PDF, which really helped, especially during these times. And first thing I did was go to my team. What are we going to do? Because they're looking at me, right? I actually asked them the same question back. I was like, we're in this together, right? And a lot of the best innovation, the ideas, stuff we did, all came from the team. You know, I'm not sitting here claiming that I'm the person that got us through this. And it was about being vulnerable and saying I don't have all the answers and going through that together, that we were able to survive. So I'm not surprised that you got that feedback as well. But before I let you go, if people want to connect with you, say hello, bring you in their own organization, do some work with you, where's the best place for people to reach out to you, and where can they grab a copy of the book as well?
Yeah, so our website is letsgrowleaders.com, or you could go to our book website, which if you want to read free chapters and that kind of stuff, courageousculturesbook.com. And we are very active on LinkedIn, so love to connect with anyone there as well.
And you can find the book literally anywhere books are sold.
Even in shops. Actually, no, that's really bad, but obviously a lot of shops aren't open, so that was a really bad joke. Well, yeah. But definitely for everyone listening, go grab a copy of the book. Make sure you connect with Karin, Dave on LinkedIn as well. And apart from that, it's been a real pleasure, Karin, David, and super excited to see how this evolves, and let's catch up in a few months.
Oh, Chris, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate
Love
you and all the
talking
work
with
that
you.
you do.
No problem. See you later. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.